Morning, guys. It's Eric in the alley again. Today I'm putting some shocks on John's car. He just picked up a Toyota RAV4. I put some brakes on it yesterday. We know his tires were cupped, needed some shocks. But what I'm also doing is something I call pirate waveforms. It's just you take a waveform off of a car to use a new sensor or something like that that you haven't used, but you want to be non-invasive. Like I wouldn't use a wire piercing probe just for, the hell of it, for just for the capture, So but do want to know how to use my pulse sensor better because I've only used it a couple times. I want to see, the different ways you could do diagnostics with it. And it's very non-invasive. Coil over plugs, the paddle probes, very non-invasive. Back probing, very non-invasive. But I really don't want to take off any more in the engine, like, the cover. But what I do want to do is put this pulse sensor in a couple different locations. Like I have these shocks to put on. But the cool thing about Hscope and being on my tablet that I take in the house, it's, I'll have the waveforms with me I could look at later on after I put the shocks on, But I could take 3 good waveforms, and what I'm doing is I'm writing down or putting in the title of it is what it is. And then I'll look at it later on and then, see if I can make heads or tails out of it. But I'll show you the one I got last night already. This is a RAV4. It's a pretty clean car, but it's parked outside and, getting a lot of rust under it. But rot key, I have going right into a vacuum line, the pulse sensor. And I'm still using the snap-on. It's a ignition accessory for a coil over plug. I even got on there sideways and it's getting good images. I still didn't build a cord yet, but then I'm going into the 512. And like I named this one intake pulse sync, and I'm putting which one that I killed. Like what I'm doing, I'll explain that too. This would be like a dead miss cylinder not working at all. I want to see how accurate, some people hate these pulse sensors, some people love them, but they're not measuring anything. It's just telling us that there's a problem. And where you go tells you different problems, where you plug it in. And I'm going into the intake. This would be like engine mechanical. Like if your RC test, you could do them both at once. It'll tell you what direction, if you have a low compression cylinder, where the compression's going. But I don't know how to really sync them up and which affects which, because I heard the ones in the exhaust, you're a couple cylinders back, but I want to see where we are on the intake. So what I did is I just ran it and the pulses and the ignition. The resolution isn't even up nearly high, and it does pretty good. I have no filter on it at all yet. On the green is the pulse sensor, and right here on the scan tool, I killed the injector for number 1. I'm synced at number 2. So what I could do with this is I could line up which cylinder's what. And I believe the intake pull so far would be the one right before it on this cylinder. Like that, this is its pull, and then number 2 fires. So, but you could figure out which hump is which, and then you could put the cylinder identifiers on it, the phase rollers, whatever. But what's cool is I'm just parroting this waveform. I'm just taking this now. Now I have that for later on. I could play with it whenever I have the time. So it's not like you're dedicating a whole day to learning something. You have something later for in your free time. You could, learn something about your scope, learn something about your sensors, because these are very cheap sensors. They're like $16 on Rotkey. But what does it tell you? One thing I noticed, that this is very easy to see, the misfire, but that is a dead miss. I mean, that is not firing at all. but it's still moving air. And it's not, see what I mean? There's the nice even humps. And then as soon as we kill the fuel, we see that big spike. Now that's what later on I want to look up, which one is the pull. You know what I mean? Because I think one would be over here. That's what I'm going to do all that later. But it seems like the intake pull's almost on the companion cylinder. I don't know, but we're going to find out. All right, guys, next I'm just going right into the oil dipstick. I'm just going to see, you know, what we get there whenever a cylinder doesn't fire at all. I mean, I'm sure this is more to check for blow-by on the rings is where this would come in handy, because like if one cylinder had a bad rings, you'd be getting a bigger pulse into the crankcase than you get. But mainly this would be also, I mean, another test I could think of, if you ever seen an engine that has a head gasket leak or a crack in the head that whenever it's cold it leaks, but whenever it gets hot it seals up. That would be a good way to prove that that's what you're dealing with if you put the pulse sensor into the coolant reservoir or radiator, and whenever you'd be seeing a higher pulse when it's cold, and then you'd be seeing it, you know, the pulse mellow out. But I mean, that's just one quick thing I could think of about, like, you know, a warm-up cycle. Right now the car's ice cold, you know, I'm going to just see what it looks like anyways while it goes, but I'm going to save the waveform once it gets warm. All right, guys, I'm going to fire it up and see what I get on the screen. All right, guys, I'm just letting the buffer fill up. It's, you know, it's kind of a useless test, but I was just seeing what it is warming up, because we could go for like 6 minutes and 24 seconds. So let it warm up a little bit, just, you know, I mean, out of curiosity, is the pulses in the crankcase whenever it's cold and the oil's thick, you know, are there less intense pulses, and does it gradually get more? Looks like something changed. I mean, it could have just been an RPM drop, but I'm going to let it warm up, save that waveform, and then I'm going to put it in the exhaust. Alright, guys, that's enough data with that. What I'm going to do next, I'm going to do the same thing after it warmed up a little bit here. I'm going to start it. We have another 6 minutes. It's recording. I lost the buffer. That don't matter. And what I'm doing is just on the scan tool, I'm going to the selected cylinder fuel cut. Now let's hit all data to go. Now what I'm going to do is just kill injector number 1, so we know we have a dead miss on number 1. You could hear the engine go down. Now we'll let it back up. And stop. Huh. Can't really tell in the crankcase much of right here's where we were killing injector number 2. Or killing injector number 1, I'm sorry. It's like slightly every now and again one, but that's not enough to be of much use unless you had a bad rings. That's why I love this little cart. I'll just push it over to where I could reach number one and the exhaust pipe at the same time. Might have to do a little turnaround here. Because being I'm not using a laptop or anything electrical, I don't have to be plugged in, and if I did, I'd just plug it in the wall. One thing, guys, if you get one of these off of Martin, he also sells it, really good leads. I've been using these since I've had that 512. They're super soft. These are the extra long ones, I believe 3 meters, but you always need so many different cords and adapters that the leads I got of his, I think, are still, the price was so good, I thought I was getting 2 leads, but it was actually 2 2-packs, so I still got 2 in reserve. And I'm still on the first, one of them I used a lot, and one of them I used quite a bit. But I also got the BNC extenders, because in a situation like this, I could just put the box in the middle. I'm going to number 1 plug still, and then I'm going to just run this cable, because it comes with an adapter to extend the BNC. You always need little gadgets like this, and this is really heavy. I have a Handtech one that doesn't weigh nearly as much as this. I don't know what that attributes to it, but the heavier one I kind of like. But I'm going to just connect that to it, so that way I'm not all stretched out. I still don't have this laying on the floor. It's still on my cart right where it always is. See, whenever you really don't need to be looking for a problem, that's a good time to even develop your techniques, and that's what you find out, what you still need. If you need an adapter, if something's going to make it easier for you. So you're just going through like a routine, but even though you're checking good, you'd still like to be as comfortable looking for bad. But what I did is I made this hose to go up the tailpipe, and I just put it on the end of the rock key, and I got the extender on it. So I can put it up in the tailpipe and fire it up and do the same thing. I think out of all of them, this is going to be where we're going to see the most evidence of a misfire with the pulse sensor. At least I'm thinking that way. I've seen Ravi Fix. He did one like it, and it was pretty noticeable on the exhaust. So we're going to see if we see something like that. All right, guys, popping out of the exhaust. Now this is just on the oscilloscope mode. Not exactly what I'd expect to see on the pulse sensor. Ignition looks right, nice. Got the sample rate at 150s. That's usually more than enough, and you see it gives you a really nice ignition. Really nice sync with. Okay, now I'm going to go to automotive mode, and I'm going to do the same thing. So I'm going to record, and then I'm going to go kill injector number 1, and then injector number 2. Alright guys, that was another good one. So that's 3 quick tests. And then we're not even going to, right now, I'm not even going to worry about it. I'm going to shut it off, charge the tablet, change John struts or back shocks, and then later on take a look at that, see if I could tell, for myself, because we should have everything to prove what cylinder belongs to what pulse in at least them 3 ways. There's different ways of using these pulse sensors too, like at cranking, not letting the car start cranking, but that's you're going for more engine mechanical. under acceleration, but right now I just did all this. This was just basic to identify the cylinder. Which cylinder belongs to what pulse. Not doing any, 2000 RPM, not doing any snap throttles, not doing anything like that. This is just getting the pulse out of the intake, the crankcase, and the exhaust, and having something to play around with later on to, just to see what I could learn. All right, guys, I'll be back. Hey guys, got the shocks on the RAV4. They kind of suck. They're hard ones. You have to move around in their very confined space. Would have been much easier on the rack, but hey, everything's doable. It's probably the hardest actual shock I ever put on. They're not even struts. There's rear shocks, and you have to take off part of the control arm, and even then you have like very limited access. But it was all fun. But having done that, now I can take a minute and look back at the waveforms I took, because I actually named them and I'll remember what they were. But I just wanted to see what use a pulse sensor can be to us, and like looking for misfires, anything like that, checking engine health, and where some places it doesn't show us anything. I'm going to switch to a screen recorder and I'm going to go through with what we found. Morning, guys. Head gaskets came in for that conversion van I'm putting the head gaskets on. I got Rock Auto order in. It has, for Jeep Liberty, I put an O2 sensor in last week. It still might have some, have to diagnose why it was still taking away fuel. It was taking away about 10%, so it was minus 10% fuel trim. But it was misfiring on all three banks, but it ran a lot better after the O2 sensor. I want to see if it corrected itself, or if we have to look into any more of that. That might be a pretty fun one with the scanner and scope. But it needs an exhaust, so I'm putting that on for, and the head gaskets come in, like I said. But last night I took a look at just some of the known goods that I took, or the playing around with the pulse sensor, like the waveforms. And that's what's kind of cool. That's what I like about, Hscope like that, because, you're sitting there having your morning coffee. I mean, from a video you watched last night, you're seeing if everything's like lines up with what you were, actually seeing with your own sensors and your own tools. And this is such a good time, like if you take a known good like that, and then as you're following along with something, you have Hscope on your tablet, you just pull it up and you're comparing your actual waveform to what Scanner Dan are saying, what he's showing with anything that you're doing, any video you're following around with. You're like, wait a minute, let me see if I understand that. Let me set my scope. It's so cool to have it right there. I mean, I enjoy it. But anyways, I was watching the one Kentucky Home Garage, and it worked out. Like I mentioned in the video, whenever you do the exhaust, when you put a pulse sensor in the exhaust, there's a certain number for a 4-cylinder, a 6-cylinder, and an 8-cylinder, how many pulses away from your sync. So it turned out for a 4-cylinder, it's 1 pulse. For a 6-cylinder, it's 2 pulses. For an 8-cylinder, it's 3 pulses to the right. So that was kind of cool to actually, just after I watch that video, pull up my own waveform and take a look at it, see what information I could get. So that's what I'm going to share with you real quick, but I'm going to turn on the screen recorder because it's just so much easier. It's like if you had Hscope open on, your tablet, phone, whatever. Okay, guys, I opened up Hscope and I went down. And here's the first one I did, and I just labeled it intake pulse. I synced with number 2, and I killed injector number 1. So with the eyeball, you could look at it all different ways. Still experimenting around with everything on this. I mean, there's just so much you could do, but basically you could get things exactly what you want, or what you want to do, and that's what you develop your own little test for. Because the way I'd figure, if you were looking for like a misfire or intermittent misfire, something like that, especially if it's intermittent, you're going to be looking at a lot of the same smooth So you're going to want to set on something where you could see the first time anything odd happens. And what I'm doing is I'm killing the injector for an injector balance test. But from here, I just pretend none of that's there. It could have returned to that. But if we've seen something like this, you know, that would be what we're looking for. Would be seeing a lot of good, and then all of a sudden would see one bad. So let's just pretend zoomed in. Where's the first place we see that? Everything's nice and smooth, and boom, you got that one skip. You know, and just pretend that goes back to normal. So if you have this one, now this is on the intake, so we could drop the cylinder identifiers, and that's what I do. Set for 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm synced to number 2. 2, 1, 3, 4. So that's just like it's 1, 3, 4, 2, but I'm synced to number 2, so that's the one I'm going to start with. Okay, so here's number 2. Here's number 2. Now you could look at that. Here's number 1. We know we cut the injector here. So it didn't end the spark, so nothing happened here. Cylinder pumped air. But which way? This thing's not measuring, you know, pressure in any direction. It's just reacting which way the difference is in the pulses. So after it skipped over here in time, it skipped over here. By the time the intake reacted, is over here. So if the misfire occurred here in the first place you see it, it's after number 3, so you'd go 1 ahead, or you'd look 1 behind where you seen it, 2 behind where it reacted the most. Because if we see that this is the biggest hit, but you do first start seeing it. This even comes up normal, and it comes up there. That's the first place you see any difference at all. So I'd say that's the next cylinder over. So if this is where you first see that, 1 cylinder back, we could identify that was number 1. That's pretty cool. I mean, it sticks out like a sore thumb if you invert it or whatever, but what I see is this is the biggest overall reaction, but we're also having this negative reaction. Which one do you see first, though? This is normal, and then here's the first dip I see. So even though this is a bigger reaction, I'm seeing a dip here. So if you wanted to invert it, or if you wanted to look at it that way, I'd just go right for that cylinder right there. And next I put it into the crankcase through the dipstick tube. So I put crankcase, it's same thing. It's synced with number 2. And then I kill injector 1 and then injector 2. So I mean, how much information do you have to see till you see? Can you see it with this much information on the screen? That's a little too much. So what you'd want to do is zoom. Well, actually, we're not going to see nothing on this. That was the point of this, actually. This we could see. And any way you want to look at it. As we go across the bottom, we still see the nice even pulses. That would be with cylinder 1 misfiring. No difference at all. And then I killed injector 2, the one I'm in sync with here. So it disappeared. And we still see no reaction in a crankcase, but we really wouldn't be thinking, you know, possibly a bigger squiggle here. And it does repeat itself every 4 times. Now, if that's the one our sync comes back in on, it's a little bit more turbulent. Let's see if that disappears. No. But if we wanted to, we could identify which cylinder made what pulse. There's just no practical use for that. I mean, unless you had bad rings and you were looking for a compression problem. Now, the last one I did, and this would probably be the most useful one anyways, is putting it in the exhaust. And you could, like I say, on the dead kill, you could see where something happened. And I did the same thing. First I killed 1, and then I killed 2, the one I'm synced to. But you could see, even with all that information on the screen, you could see instantly the misfire. I mean, that's pretty easy to spot. Gives you could have so much more time on the screen and still see right where the disturbance is and zoom in on it. The eyeball might do it. Still getting used to using the eyeball up here on the top. But I just use my fingers to zoom in. I mean, that's kind of one of the reasons why I like Hscope so much, is just a pinch to zoom. I mean, it makes things so much easier to do, like, you know, live right there when you need it. But this would be same thing. You could put the cylinder identifiers. But see, they went back to 1, 2, 3, 4. One, 3, 4, 2. Okay, and we'll sync. Number 2 there. Number 2 there. Then we could zoom in on. I always find it's a little bit easier to line them up bigger and then zoom in on, then do any fine adjustments if you want to, but get one good screen in there. So we know coming up right here would have been where I killed the injector. So this time number 1 didn't fire. Number 3 fired fine. The next one, the very first reaction we see out of normal is down. This is getting hit from this not firing. So if we're looking at the bottom, you skip 1 cylinder. So it would be, right, no, number 1 didn't fire. The very next one you go over 1. And boom, there it is. Like, so if you've seen this, you know it's a cylinder in front of it on a 4-cylinder engine. On an 8-cylinder engine, like you could probably even double it, like you simulate an 8-cylinder and have number 1. But what you'd have is like this misfired on number 1. So you'd go over, if you seen this reaction after number 3, it was number 1. If this was a V6, it would have been over here, which is number 4. And if it was a V8, if you seen this reaction over here, you'd go back 3. That would be number 1 missing. You'd see that same reaction over here on a V6, you'd see it here, and on a 4-cylinder here. But that's kind of what's nice about, you know, playing around, even causing your own misfire, just get in tune with where you're going to see it, because I had no idea if it was going to be this uphill or this downhill. But my whole take on it is the very first thing out of norm is right there. So I'm counting cylinders. It's not the first one you see. Like, you don't want to look at number 3 and say, aha, look, number 3 fired, that's its exhaust balls. No, it's number 1 fired. That's its exhaust balls. But all right, that's all it took. But I mean, that's what I mean. You just take these, they're pirate waveforms, you take them. You're not looking for nothing. You're just using one of your sensors, but you're not being evasive. You know, then whenever you do something again, like if you're changing spark plugs, then sure, that's not going to hurt. You're already taking the plug out. Put your pressure transducer in there if you want to. If you want to play with that day to get some information, just to see with your own eyes what you're looking for or what you're going to be seeing, you know. So that's pretty fun, and hope you guys enjoyed taking a look at that, because you know, it's pretty fun to get into. Hey guys, I always have like one final note. I think I forget to say something I meant to say. The Hscope and the HS512, the 502s, they're very cheap scopes, and they work so good, and the Hscope software works so good that you could actually get into like pulse sensor, you know, diagnostics, follow along with, like, you know, almost master classes, unless you're looking at, you know, more than 2 channels. But you could actually, you know, follow along, do your own, get into whatever. Like I said, there's people get into just pulse sensors. Some people it's pressure transducers. You know, other people it's secondary ignition. Some people it's primary ignition. It's, you know, it's a wide open. But the main thing that you want to do is start testing known goods, taking advantage of these pirate ones, man. I mean, just take a waveform because it's fun. I mean, you get to go back and you get to see, instead of watching a video of somebody, you know, doing like you just did. But I mean, it's cool to see it on a picoscope that people are actually doing it. But like, if you can't afford one, or if you're not sure if you're even getting into that, this is all under $200. I mean, the HS512s, it was under 100, it was like $95. You want to get good leads. You want to make your own leads. If you want to save even more money, you can make your own pressure transducers. You can make a lot of sensors. You could buy Chinese ones, you could buy Amazon ones, eBay ones. They all work. I mean, the one I'm using on for the coilover plug, that's one of the things I wanted to also mention. But I got it in a trade with old Snap-on Modus. But I mean, that's pretty good. I mean, the whole time I was watching Danner, I was like, yeah, I'd love to have that scope. And I got a Modus sitting in my drawer, and you know, I've been playing with Hscope a lot more because it's just more convenient. You know, and it's doing the same things. It's doing on 2 channels. If I need 4, it's nice to have it there. But whenever I'm taking these, like, you know, pirate ones, it's like why do I need 4 channels? I'm checking 2 sensors. Unless I want to get like a 3-channel cam crank, that I could do that with the Modus, and that's fun too. It's fun using, but I figured I'd want to use that more than the software. It's basically free, and under $100 scope and $15 rod key sensor. There's a lot of cheap sensors out there. You don't need the Pico ones to actually follow along with what you're learning. My intent was to follow along with I was a member of Danner Premium for 2 years before I heard about Hscope. I wanted to get that one on rod key, their oscilloscope, and then they no longer available. So I was looking for an in-between the Handtech and Pico, but I figured I'd just save up, keep watching videos, keep following along with Danner Premium. But it's not the same when you see it. Everything that you learned, you're going to kind of forget, or it's all going to come up to once. So it's the more you actually plug in, the easier time you have back probing, acquiring the signal, because that's what you could share with others and get some help on it. As long as you could get a good signal, and I'm telling you, anybody knows anything about automotive oscilloscopes, if you show them Hscope images, they're not going to say, well, I can't tell you what's wrong with that, or I can't teach you something about that waveform just because it wasn't on the Pico. If it's on a Hscope, they could still teach you something about it. There's telltale things, but I just want to show you that promise. The last thing I'm going to talk about is this snap on the coil over plug. Now, I tried this one. The one video I did with a Honda, this is what I was using, and I still want to know what's in that. This guy on, I think I'm actually going to reach out to him. I don't know if you ever seen him. This guy on Electro Boom, he'll know what the hell's in there. This thing gets such good waves. Like this one, well, let me get automotive. The one I just did, I had the sample rate at 150, which isn't that much. This has a lot more. In any of these, I was just using the secondary ignition for a sync. But if you look how far it just pinch and zoom. It's not a just-in-time basis. You just zoom in and zoom out until you're content with what you see. Like, you could even remove the bottom of the buffer if you just wanted to see all waveform. But with a scope this cheap, and I'm just using this for a sync. So I'm splitting resolution between 2 channels, and I'm about medium on the resolution. And that's your spark. In Hscope still, it fills the whole screen, and Hscope still didn't, no dots, no nothing. So you could take measurements on any of this. You could get in the secondary ignition analysis if that's your thing. If that's most of the videos you watch, and that's most of this really fascinates you, or if pressure transducers do, you could do it all with Hscope. It has all the tools that you need to really, if you wanted to measure just how long that spark line, I got it rolling a little bit. You know, 1.53 milliseconds. I mean, you could do so many different measurements with this software that it's so impressive. It's so cheap. But if you're watching, you know, seminars of some of these people who wrote books about oscilloscopes, some of the stuff's going to be you know, specific to Pico scopes, but it's just actually getting your own images and, you know, seeing how you like to view them, seeing what settings you use. So if you're thinking about getting into it, man, I can't say enough about it. I was looking for something in between until I could afford a Pico. Yeah, and that's what I'm saying. Like, that's been laying in there for a while. But I am using some of the accessories. All right, guys. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed this little video. I know I did.